Hello, everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful day. And hopefully, wherever it is that you're joining us from, you've had a fantastic day. And as always, thank you for making us part of your listening pleasure. As always, we do what we do for you so we can bring you some amazing conversations. We get to connect you with some amazing guests and just have a wonderful conversation. So I'm just really excited about today's conversation as I welcome to the show Caryn Sever, who is somebody that I have just met recently, but I'm really excited to talk to her about her role as an instructional designer and obviously learning a little bit more about her experience and what she's seen in the higher ed space as we talk about generative AI in these spaces. So I'm really excited to welcome Caryn to the show. Caryn, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
I am doing wonderful, Caryn. Thank you for, being here and taking a little bit of time out of your busy schedule to just have a wonderful conversation with me. And as you know, we cover EdTech conversations, but for the last couple of months, it's just been really talking about generative AI as even though it's been since November of 2022, we're already January 2025, and it just seems like things are moving fast, but slow at the same time, many times. And I'm just really excited and thrilled to have somebody here with your experience in higher ed to tell us how things are going in higher ed and obviously through your experience. So, Caryn, before we dive in, can you give us a little brief introduction and what your context is in the higher ed space?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. Thanks for those listening. I had a different kind of journey. I was a grown-up student, an adult student. I went to community college after a bunch of like starts and stops in college at the regular age. And I did a lot of traveling. And then when I finally figured out what I wanted to get out of my education, when I started to sort of take agency over it, I was in my mid-20s, started community college, transferred straight to a university, and at that university, I was taking this class. It was called Digital Whitman. I was a history major, and I needed to get some English credits as well. And I was interested in the idea of digital Whitman. I'm not a huge fan of Walt Whitman, but the idea of taking somebody so nature oriented and just sort of analog and putting like that against juxtaposing that against digital, I needed to know. I needed to know. So I took the class, and it was designed with an English department and an instructional designer. And as soon as I took that first class, after they both presented it, they explained how the course was going to go. The faculty member was going to be the subject matter expert. We were going to discuss Whitman, and then the instructional designer was going to have us create projects in an online space in the blog and try to translate that into some kind of digital footprint to sort of bring us into that like 21st century. His name is Jim Groom. He is an instructional designer at Mary Washington and happens to be the founder and OG EduPunk. So if you go into Wikipedia, you will find Jim Groom and his picture right there, and he's got his knuckles up here, and it says EduPunk, and that's the picture there. This was the person who I went straight to, and I was like, "What do you do? I got to know what you do because I need to do what you do. This is amazing." And ever since then, every goal has been towards instructional design. So I got my bachelor's degree in American history. I started working at a college in doing communications coordination and getting sort of embedded in higher ed, trying to really develop a lot of connections. I wound up being able to take that communications coordination and build a website and communications for that whole department, and then start to do some webinars where my director was hosting them. And then we did Twitter chats, live Twitter chats. And this was in 2010, 2011. So I was a pretty early adopter of a lot of these like break fast social media things. And I was trying to bring it into the sort of analog higher ed space because this is exactly what Jim Groom did. And this is what I feel is part of my mission. And that went really well. And I translated that into a job in virtual presentation designing, which will definitely be called instructional design from now on, but they didn't really know what that was in the mid 2010s. Folks were just there, like, are you a graphic designer? What's are you a teacher? What do you do? You know, so there's a lot of folks I think in our industry like selling people on our job. What do you do? Explaining it. So a lot of different names. And so that was how I actually got in. I found this virtual presentation coach position at a contractor for the VA. And they had me traveling all over working with presenters and subject matter experts to translate modules, content, hour-long webinars, you know, building upon multi-webinars that built upon each other for live presentations and on demand. And that was really what helped me understand both how we're translating education in a digital space, but also the different kind of animals that online education, even in a synchronous and asynchronous, which we can talk about later, are so very different from face to face modalities. And so they gave a real clear picture on how to structure education for really any topic, because that was training. And now I work in higher ed again. So, really, any topic and how to structure that for this digital space. I took that job. I parlayed it into a position at the Library of Congress, where I was the first instructional designer there for the Congressional Research Service, which was incredibly cool, with the downside of having to sell people on my job. And the fantastic upside on those few who took me up on it, their presentations when they were presenting to Congress, when they were presenting, you know, in education spaces, when they were going into the BBC, their presentations were clearly elevated because we designed it to scaffold for that kind of modality. You know, and so I was working with folks who were speaking directly with Congress, speaking directly with analysts, speaking to press, you know, so many different types of ways that we have to structure how we deliver information. And that helped really build up that skill set. And then I moved back to higher ed because I love higher ed and politics. Even at the Library of Congress, it's still government, and it's just intense, and I don't like that. So I love higher ed, and I'm going to stay there forever, because I truly feel that these skills that I learned in all of these places, I want to bring it back to the students. I want to bring it back to me. You know, I was that student right there who met this instructional designer, and now here I am, and I love my job. It's exciting. You know, it's different every day. I get to lead people, I get to innovate, I get to use incredible pieces of technology, not just AI, but VR and AR. I get to go to like Microsoft garages and play with stuff. Like, this is a really cool job, and I want to bring that back to higher ed. But the main goal that I really wanted to take back to higher ed was building up the skill set, all of these years of trying to figure out how to infuse it, how to deliver information for varied learners, for diverse learners, and especially for neurodiverse learners like me. And I landed really on how much I want to make sure that information is accessible to all in as many modalities as I can possibly find for them. And so that's why I went back to community college, because I truly believe that that helping students succeed requires building this kind of scaffolding, this technological infrastructure, this understanding on how to wield technology, how to bring that into the workforce, and how to sort of integrate that back into society. And so this is why I'm back in education, because I truly believe the skill set that Jim imparted on me, it deserves a place in higher ed to help impart that on students. And faculty are very, I mean, we work with lots of different folks, but I think that faculty are finding that it is elevating their teaching and their understanding of their students and the student and how they learn. And so that's really where I am now. And I lead a group of people now. I lead a department, and we've increased enrollment, but what we really have done was increase innovation and applied the transparent design for learning technique, the tilt technique, into all of our courses, so that every student that takes an asynchronous course in our college understands the purpose, the directions, the grades, the criteria, and has all of that. So, at the very least, that structure, that scaffolding, this is a legacy I'm hoping to leave.
Well, that is wonderful. I mean, this is an amazing journey, and I'm just so thankful that you're here today because just in everything that you just shared right now and all the experiences that you've had, and all it took, like you mentioned, is sometimes even as a student or, as a student and now even as a teacher, sometimes you have that one student that just needed that one teacher to just show them one thing and just really take off with it like Jim did for you. And so that gets me really excited and really pumped up because it just seems like we're on the same wavelength here because I truly love everything you said, especially, the scaffolding portion of it. I remember going to college or university in my very first couple of years, and it was the same as it was in high school. It's like, teacher led lecture, write notes on the board, write notes, and that's it. Like there really wasn't a lot of other technology involved at that time, other than, hey, when you need to go type up your paper, you go to the computer lab and you just type up your paper there. And I mean, to age myself, when I was going and doing research there at the university, many times I was still using the little microfiche machines, and that many people may not even know what that microfiche machine is. But if you don't look it up, because then that'll kind of tell you a little bit about where I was at. But now you're absolutely right. A lot has changed. And even with myself going through a master's program that was completely, asynchronous, and then doing some doctoral studies also where it was just a mix of, asynchronous and then synchronous meetings and so on. But the platforms that are involved, the way that the information is given, the way that, like you said, finding those resources, it really matters and can make a difference in somebody's experience. And that's what it's all about. But I just love everything that you said. And I'm just gonna say and throw it out there. I was like, I think like even K-12 needs instructional designers, to be able to understand this and really bring this to the students and understanding the scaffolding, understanding the universal design for learning, and making
Yeah.
sure that you have tools for learning for everybody so everybody has access to just different modalities of learning the same concept and the scaffolding part of it. So I'm just juiced up and really excited about this conversation now, and I'm waiting to hear too about your experience now that we're going to kind of push back a little bit here in time. And I always love to also ask my guests, November 22 of 2022, we all know what happened and what was released at that given time. And now we've got so much, so many platforms, new platforms. Of course, one of the big hot topic right now is DeepSeek right now, and how it's performing or outperforming, Chat GPT and things of that sort. And of course, showing us a little bit about how, yes, we may be, or OpenAI may have, the resources, but the technicality of it and the background. I mean, we're like revving up OpenAI and DeepSeek's just running like a Honda Accord. And so it's like there's so many things out there right now and a lot of
Mhm.
innovations taking place. But I want to ask you what your initial thoughts were November 2022 when we first got a glimpse publicly of OpenAI and access to OpenAI. What was the first thing that came to your mind?
The way we learn is changing. Are you ready to transform education? Welcome to Yellow Dig, where learning isn't just another assignment, it's a conversation, a movement, a game changer. With Yellow Dig, students engage naturally, sharing ideas, exploring concepts, and driving conversations that matter. No forced post, no busy work, just real learning. Educators, you'll see the difference. Higher engagement, deeper understanding, and a thriving community of learners who want to participate. From higher ed to workforce training, Yellow Dig fuels curiosity, collaboration, and connection inside and outside of the classroom. The future of learning is here. Are you in? Yellow Dig, connecting minds and igniting possibilities.
The first thing that came to my mind was I'm going to the website and I'm going to put my name on the waiting list because I want to play with it. I am an early adopter, but I am not an early integrator of technology, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So yes. So immediately when I found out that the generative AI had finally broken, because there had been sort of like rumbles for years that this was coming, and then all of our focus had been on VR, and AR, and then all of a sudden it's like look up's over here again, and as soon as I got access to it, I started using it as a thought partner, and I use it, and I have been using it since as not just a thought partner, but let's call I call it Sky, and it's my graduate assistant basically. And so I use personally, and have since day one almost, Sky as my personal assistant. But then the other thing I did, because I am, ever a paranoid but like vast reader of lots of science fiction, I also have sort of a running chatbot question that I constantly ask on a loop. What is your name? So I have and on ChatGPT. So I have a little experiment, and I started running experiments to see how long or what ChatGPT would say. Is it self-aware? What does it pass the Turing test? All of those extra things. And so usually it said its name was Star or Sky. And that was like my initial thoughts was like, how am I going to push this to see what I can do with it as me? And once I feel comfortable wielding it, and also not just wielding it, but I needed to know the lexicon. I needed to understand how do you really generate a prompt, not what someone's telling me the right things are, but how do I generate a prompt, which is very different from maybe how you generate a prompt or how a faculty member generates a prompt. And so a lot of my initial thoughts were, what is the formula? What's the recipe to get the prompts to where you want them to be? And so that was really my early research, was starting to develop like prompt libraries and testing them constantly on my chatbot to see what I could refine. And then I use that later. We can talk about that later. But it was the prompts and really understanding how to break down language very specifically. And also later on, after going to a few, conferences and chatting with some colleagues, creating personas for my chatbots, and then prompting those personas and seeing what that
That is some
did.
really cool stuff. At the time I was just like, hey, let's go ahead and just type anything in, see what it gives me. But, at the same time, like you said, I really, what that one statement at the very beginning, that one sentence is, yes, I agree with you. And I'm very much like you, where I am an early adopter, but I'm not always an early integrator, because I want to go through this. I want to see what I can break, or if it breaks. And I don't want to put something in the hands of teachers or students that is not where it should be at all whatsoever, because obviously safety, data, all of that good stuff. And then of course, just making sure that all the outputs would be something that would be safe, and just protecting your children, because you don't want something like that to happen. And so now, like you mentioned, that was your initial experience. And now let's jump forward, for 3 years. So now we went from
Mhm.
back into the future, well, back into the past, and now we're coming back to present. Now, with all the changes that have occurred, and obviously all the updates and so on, I want to ask you what has changed from 2022 to now to 2025 for you as far as generative AI?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I So for me, I have found that I am able to wield it and integrate it far more than I had certainly in the past. Um, I notice many of the tools that I review that I want to integrate, or that our system is out no that that colleges are integrating, um, are infused with AI in some kind of way. And so, kind of understanding the other large language processing models as well, I think is a really important piece to this, especially when it comes to instructional design, especially when it comes to implementing into EdTech and LMSs, learning management systems. And so I think what I'm learning is a couple of things. How do I use generative AI? How do I wield it for good in courses? And we can talk about that in a second. But also, how are these products using it? How are they creating knowledge bases? Is this real AI? Where are the nodes? Where are we pulling from? What base are we building? What information is this providing to the students? So the things that I can't control, I keep a very, very close eye on. And even the products that colleges that I've worked at don't use, I keep a close eye on all of the products because I think that folks are really infusing AI. And since I'm saying this now, I just want to be able to say this out loud sometime, which would be what I say to a lot of educators when I go to a lot of these conferences is as folks are building these tools, integrating and leveraging AI in some way and large language models and things like that educators, especially at higher ed and K through 12, need to raise their hand and be subject matter experts and testers, and they need to get in front of these folks who are building these tools. So I'm just saying that to your community now too, on my soapbox. Please get in front of the folks building these tools, because what developers don't know, they don't know. And if we're not here to help guide folks as the subject matter experts, then that information will never get to these folks' hands while they're coding and creating. And so we really need to be in front of folks. So that's one thing that I have really learned over the last 3 years is to take a real critical look at how AI is being used in products. On the other side, and this is like the super exciting positive side that I'm so excited to talk about. Both are positive, but this has like incredible results and is super fun for me. I have been working with faculty to integrate AI, generative AI activities into courses, so that we can start scaffolding, start building up those skills for our students. And a lot of it is coming from the needs of employers. Honestly, we're hearing things all like educators, especially instructional designers, are hearing things like, I have a lot of recent grads who aren't able to take feedback, or having trouble processing information in the way that we're providing it to them. We've heard feedback that entry level workers were actually like ghosting their employers because they received some critical feedback and they didn't know how to sort of accept, integrate, reflect, and then reflect it back, right? And it's that resilience piece. How do you build resilience? It's such a like a squishy, it's a squishy skill, right? It's like a soft skill, and I hate the word soft skills because those are just human skills. But if you don't have any kind of infrastructure to build that kind of human skill, you're not going to bring that to the workforce either. How can you expect a student to just know how to take feedback, if you're not providing? So one of the really cool projects that I started working on, and this really is just interdisciplinary. It's really a product for anybody. It's not a product. It's just an activity for anyone, which is using generative AI. I chose ChatGPT after a series of very specific prompts, to have students put a product of work. In this case, I was using like coding a very simple calculator, but as I don't know how much software development experience you have, but with coding, it's like you could do a simple calculator. It's not always going to, like, you're not going to have the same student do the exact same code over and over again. There's always going to be some little variation, because it's design, it's preference. And so we have the students create the code for their simple calculator. And based on a lot of prompt engineering that took a long time to get there, we have the students use specific prompts that say, please evaluate this code for elegance, usability, what do you predict? How do you predict people would use it? Are there errors? But it will not debug the code. It will not fix the code for you. It's not going to give you a brand new code and that's what you're going to use. So it takes a lot of prompt engineering to create the prompt that allows students to get the feedback. The students then use that prompt provided by the faculty. They put their code in, they put the prompt in, they get the feedback. They read it, they reflect, they update, and then they post on a discussion board to their peers the initial code, the feedback from their generative AI, of choice, their reflection, some new updated code based on the feedback, and then their experience, well, their reflection, their experience of how they got there. They get the feedback from their peers. They take that whole package, they update the code if they need to, they reflect, and they hand that in a one-to-one instructor assignment. And then they get feedback again. And then they close the full assignment by a one-to-one instructor reflective journal that some faculty might want to make like extra credit. So now we have a full feedback loop. We're sort of like, I guess I use the word titrating up, where we're kind of building up this skill, we're building the muscle. So what we're really doing is like, I'm trying to, almost like PT, trying to build the muscles in a safe environment that feels completely without judgment, because it's a machine. So that's sort of like the first experience, and you get your feedback. And then it's peers. And peer feedback is important for a lot of reasons, but feels somewhat safer sometimes than instructor feedback. But also, we're not just building up this muscle, we're demonstrating what would actually take place in the workplace. Because in the real world, you would create your assignment, or you'd be given your project, you would take your draft. Now in this world, if your employer allows you to, you would put that through ChatGPT with whatever series of prompts, or your generative AI, or whatever kind of feedback review you can do that is acceptable, usually for some digital format. Grammarly, that's a good one too. And then you'll take that, you'll redo your draft, and then you'll provide that to your middle manager or your direct supervisor, or a group of a project peers who you're all working together on. And then you all will submit that to the boss or whomever the deliverable is for. And so what we're trying to do, as instructional designers, and certainly what I'm trying to do here, is not just build the muscle, not just build the scaffolding, but everything has this like extra purpose. You get your feedback, you build up the muscle, you know how to take feedback, you stay in the workforce. But not only that, what happened was the feedback that the peers were giving was elevated with every time we implemented this project again. And it's because they start to build up a lexicon too of how to give feedback. So now you're building leaders. And these are the types of activities that I really think generative AI is a game changer for this kind of stuff. This works everywhere. I had a friend who he's a screenwriter. I gave him this activity because he felt really uncomfortable getting notes from a new producer. And I was like, hey, can you create, like a closed chatbot, just make a folder, make a closed chatbot and give it some prompts and ask it to give you some feedback on maybe some passages. And then that'll help you build up that resilience. And that's the thing. This could work with anything. This could work with training. This could work in the workforce, but it is working with students. And that's the real positive side. I don't want to go negative until you ask me that question, because I'm really excited about this particular project, and it works well at IT, but it also works in history, works in English, works pretty much for everything.
Yeah, this is fantastic, because this is the first time, obviously, in an interview that somebody goes in depth like this, because of the experience that you have, and not just talking about a tool and what it can do and how quickly it can do it for a teacher or how quickly it can do it for a student, but you actually just went very deep and explained how, in leveraging the power of generative AI, building, like you call it, that squishy skill, which is that resilience and being able to take that feedback. And I find that just outstanding. Like, this is the first time I never thought about that. I'm sure that maybe many others haven't thought about that. But after today, and I know after they listen to this episode, they can go in so many directions, because this is fantastic. And I see in your explanation just that overall, that overarching goal, which is, like you mentioned, your passion to help students and bringing it back to the students and building them up to be able to get ready for that workforce. And they're collaborating, they're creating, they're getting that feedback, they're reiterating, they're submitting, they're getting the feedback either from, of course, initially from the chatbot, then from their peers, and then ultimately from their professor. So there's so many layers there of building the student resiliency up and being able to understand not only how to provide positive feedback, as you're working with the team or with your peer, but also being able to take that feedback as well and saying, okay,
Mhm.
let me take a step back and let me go ahead and fix this based on these suggestions. I think that is fantastic, because again, like I mentioned to you, all we talk about is how quickly it can do this for you, how quickly it's going to give the teacher back time, how quickly the students can do this. And, going back to, oh, well, the students are just going to put it in ChatGPT and cheat and so on. But this right here has so many layers to it
Mhm.
that it's really, ChatGPT is not even at the forefront or the main protagonist here. It's really the student in their
Yep.
growth of resilience. And this is fantastic, Karen. This is amazing. I
Thanks.
absolutely love this. This is wonderful. So now
Thank you.
let me ask you before we get to maybe that other question. We won't go into the negative side yet, but I want to ask you though, just initially, as you're introducing this new technology, you're working with the subject matter experts, which in this case would be those professors, your colleagues, your peers, and so on. What were initially some of the barriers that you had to overcome as you're introducing this new technology to, like I mentioned, your professors or even people that are within your department?
So I can speak to my experience overall of my experience with professors, but not specifically to my professors, if that makes sense. So and especially at the conferences and conversations I've been having with faculty, just honestly across the board, I think some of the concerns are that are we offloading thinking? And I think this is a concern that does get brought up to me in so many different venues. Honestly, it's like, what does it mean when we offload thought and we create sort of these easier pathways to answer sort of questions like that? And we create easier pathways to what could be perceived as cheating. And I do think that by and large, and we could read Inside Higher Ed every single day, and there is some article about folks who are really concerned about generative AI and academic integrity specifically. And that is really one of the reasons why I keep trying to sort of flip this narrative in a different way, because I truly believe that if we create digital literacy, that and we create activities like the one I described where we allow students to wield generative AI or technology, whatever's to come. We build up that scaffolding and sort of the frameworks and the understanding and the grace where students can wield this technology, then we may wind up combating some of that academic integrity and these cheating problems, because we're saying, listen, you can't use it here. Like, it's definitely not okay to use it here. And I will be totally, totally fair. I have absolutely seen full swaths of text taken and then dropped into a discussion board. I've even seen texts that say, maybe you could use, with like the prompt up top that explains like what the prompt is. And then and then the little thing at the bottom of ChatGPT that sort of gives you that summary of what it's accomplished for you. And I've seen that too. And I would say that if we're not being specific with our students, for one, about how they're allowed or not allowed, or the rules that we have around this technology, then they're not going to know. Right. I mean, there's no, people don't know what you don't know, and common sense isn't common. And we work in colleges of diverse populations of people from all over the world. And so there are varying understandings of in cultures that have different ideas of what like cheating looks like, and so we really need to be specific about the criteria in each and every one of our courses, what we want as educators. And that's the dominion I think that we hold. And I think that most faculty at this point are in that space where they're having to define it individually and really looking for larger bodies of leadership and like accreditors, I think more so, to define how to use it as a blanket. And I think this is sort of that crisis that we're looking at is like, we want, not we, but folks want somebody to say, cheating is a problem and generative AI is the cause, but we need some sort of policy to put on top of this, but we're chasing smoke because the technology is just constantly getting better. And so I truly believe that the only way to do it is to create digital literacy activities where our students get to use it, get to wield it, training for all faculty and staff and folks all over the place in all colleges to wield it and use it. And the training is key. And I do think that, any institution that someone is at, I think that part of that training too requires kind of an in-house component because institutions are individual. They have their own flavor. They have their own way that they do stuff, especially in online course development. And so part of the problem I think that we are finding in this space is this one shop training, and like this one size fits all
Yes.
blanket AI training that's like, this is what AI is, this is what it can do, and it can also do this, and this is how it does it for you, and this is why we do it. But it's like, how do I use it for me? And those are the kinds of, I think, trainings where people like me, people like you come in and have these more tailored trainings where it seems so much less scary to adopt because there's this other real thing happening in the world that I think that higher ed doesn't really want to name. And I don't mind naming it because it's real. We this is a technological revolution that we are a part of right now. We are living through it. And that means that almost every single profession, whether you got an English degree or, any or an engineering degree or an art degree, requires some form of IT understanding and basic usage of like infusing that into your course in some way. And so I think part of what we do need to work on as sort of educators in higher ed is blending that interdisciplinary work together, because I think what we could do a better job at just across the board as educators is going back to our IT partners in education, who I think that in general IT has been looked at like this group over here that educates folks, but like they're so separate, and then there's all these other educators over here. But this is the world we live in, where almost all education takes place through an LMS somehow, even when it's face to face. And it requires technology and wielding of technology and scaffolding. And so I think what I would love to see, and I think and this is how I kind of reframe these conversations, is for faculty who have a little bit of fear adopting this due to a lot of academic integrity issues, is to work and see how they can wield it in their course. And if they're concerned about adopting because it is so technologically advanced and because there's not enough training available to them, or they don't know how to wield it, it's time to work together as departments, the folks who know how to wield this type of technology, working together and creating courses just like Jim Groom did with my English course, and creating a digital Whitman so that students can not only get that subject matter expertise that they need that foundational knowledge as human beings in the world. They also need to know how to do their jobs when they wield that later. They use both to help design and make good decisions, and then implement it, the actual action of doing the job in the workplace. And all of these things are really important, which is why it's so important that all classes have some kind of digital literacy and some kind of understanding in this new space, regardless of discipline, because this is the world we live in now. And I think, honestly, as educators, it is our responsibility to really remind students to take a closer look, and to understand how to wield it, and also to know the limitations and know what's not okay. And then the final thing I'll say on this one, because this is a big thing that I have been talking about a lot, And this it does play out, I think, in a lot of classrooms, and actually post pandemic, both face to face, synchronous and asynchronous, is this sort of post human interactions that we have. And so, and this is maybe just a me thing, but I have some colleagues too, at Arizona University, like Dr. Angela Gunder talks about this all the time. Also a great person if you've never met her. But this whole idea of maintaining our humanity in this
Mm.
post-human world, and working with students to not only design prompts, but to design them with decorum, to work on you continuing to have sort of like, language that is inclusive and polite. Because my fear, just as an educator and just a human in this world, is, when we're typing in orders for a machine to do our bidding at such incredible rates with an incredible mind that we couldn't even fathom, honestly, what does that mean for me as I'm barking orders to a machine to do my job? Am I going to lose my humanity? And so I think part of that is me trying to infuse this idea that students still need to treat this entity in a polite way, that this is still an entity that is supporting you. It is a thought partner. It is not a person, but it still requires respect, and language requires respect. And so that's one of the things that I also think is really part of digital literacy, is understanding that we have to maintain our humanity as we continuously bark orders at new machines to do our jobs.
That there This is amazing. Like, definitely, you definitely hit on a lot of great things here as far as, working with your departments, working with professors. And, I on LinkedIn too, I'm connected to a lot of other instructional designers, but also a lot of professors in higher ed. And like you mentioned, some of them that do know how to use this or have really been those early adopters and are able to share. Many of them are sharing and they're bringing this to light, not only within their campuses, but to other professors and colleagues and so on, and being able to share this. And one thing that I do find, though, is that there is also that level of professor that's like all in, you need to use it, you must use it. And if you haven't done so yet, you're falling behind. But then there's the other side that is kind of like a me, sort of in the sense of like, well, let me just wait and see, because you never know what's going to happen. But it doesn't mean that I'm not, going to try it out, or it doesn't mean that I'm not going to get there, but it just means that, I'm deciding to just take it slow a little bit, start process everything in, and, not really going to get into that whole fear of missing out. So sometimes there's a sense of urgency, like you need to get into this. Yes, it's been what, 2022, now we're 2025, and yes, a lot has changed. There are going to be a lot more people that are slowly seen, because like you mentioned, there is a lot of software that has some form of algorithm automation, AI, within it. So that knowledge will come, but it's great that there are many people such as yourself, such as, and I mentioned Jason Gulia, I'll mention Dr. Luke Hobson, and many others that are out there on this space that are sharing these wonderful things. And I think that's something, like you mentioned, it's scary but exciting all at once. And I think for me, I kind of liken it to when I first got into this role as a, uh, learning coordinator here, but the title was different at the time, but now it's learning coordinator. Uh, I got tasked with creating a new template for new lesson plans and so on. And now we were moving into Google Workspace. And so nobody was using Google Workspace at the time. And now I'm like, okay, I'm the guy. Like, now we're going to integrate it. We're going to do this. We're going to start using Google Workspace. I changed the lesson plan template, and boy, did I, like, the whole district was so upset. I mean, they were mad because now they couldn't just copy and paste. They had, because that other platform was going to get shut down. So they couldn't just grab those old lesson plans and just turn them in. So they had to start from scratch. Although then they found out, and I told them, hey, don't worry, just save these. The dates are going to change. And chances are you're going to have the same book. So don't panic. Don't worry. So got over that fear. But there was this one particular teacher who said, no, I'm not going to do it. And there's nothing that you can do to teach me how to do this, because I refused. And later on, she would just call me and I would just kindly go over. We would have one on one sessions walked her through the stuff, showed her. And now, like after COVID and everything, she was like, I'm going to retire. Now she's like, you know what? This kind of extended, my teaching career a little bit more because now I've learned how to automate things. I feel more comfortable with tech. And to me, I just kind of liken it to that right now there are those that are going to resist. But after
Mhm.
a while, you gotta just show them like, hey, look, here's how you can try it out personally. Now imagine
Mhm.
how this can translate into your classroom, so on and so forth. And it's exciting times, but it's scary for many because of the speed of it. But I'm just thankful for enthusiastic instructional designers, humans, just people, great people like you that are out there just sharing, your knowledge and just sharing your passion about generative AI with everybody. So, Caryn, thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining me this evening and just sharing your passion. And I definitely learned a lot. And I know that our audience members definitely learned a lot. And so, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we definitely have all your information on, of course, our podcast page, and people will be able to connect with you on all of your socials. But before we wrap up, we always wrap up with the last three questions. Hopefully, you got a glimpse of them,
I did.
earlier today. And so let's go ahead and get started. So the first question I love to ask is, well, let me set it up here. As we know, every superhero has a pain point or a weakness, and we know that for Superman, kryptonite was his weakness. So I want to ask you, Caryn, in the current state of higher education, what would you say is your current edu kryptonite?
Kryptonite. I would call it barriers to access. I am always and forever going to be an OER, Open Educational Resource advocate. And I have found, as the years go by, there are more and more barriers to implement OERs than one would expect. And so my kryptonite, where I get, my mama bear part, where I start to really, do get my facts out and build my receipts and send all of that, is when folks are telling me that there is a paid resource that might be better, and loving to work with faculty and librarians and my wonderful colleagues to find OERs that are better than even that resource that they're looking at. So that would be, yeah, that would be it. Barriers to
Nice.
access.
Love it. Great answer. All right. Question number two. If you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
um, ha- have you heard of metacognition? Um, I honestly think in this day and age, metacognition and the understanding of how we understand as human beings, I really feel if we all sat with that and reflected upon ourselves, we would find agency and accountability. And these are things that I truly, truly, truly want to see all people have.
Excellent. Great answer. Love it. And the last question, Caryn, is if you could trade places with one person for a day, who would that person be and why?
So I kept thinking of educator. He is kind of an educator, but the same person kept popping in my mind. I I don't know if you know them, but I'm a very big fan of the band Gogol Bordello. And the lead singer's name is Eugene Hutz. And he is an incredible writer, an incredible singer songwriter, also an educator. He's also from Ukraine. He travels the world educating people on freedom and love and understanding. And he just came out with this incredible movie that everyone should check out about his immigrant experience and just the way that he educates people. I just saw him in DC and he was it was like an interview style thing, which is really cool because he's always just playing in the band. And he's brilliant. He was talking about the Stoics and then the optimists and how that reflects in his songwriting and the book that he's writing. And he's just a brilliant man. So I would love to be him and experience his world through his eyes for one day. And if he's listening, which he probably isn't, I am a huge fangirl.
Oh, that is awesome. Well, we'll see if we can make it happen. We'll definitely maybe cut this clip, send it out to him, and that'd be great, just to see if we can make that connection. That'd be wonderful. But Caryn,
That'd be
thank you
cool.
so much. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you so much just for being who you are and what you're doing for the students and really just, knowing and seeing and hearing, through this conversation that really everything that you're doing it with that in mind. It's all for the student. And I'm all for that. And I love that. And I'm thankful for Jim also, who inspired you to be in this role that you're currently doing. And with all that experience that you have, it's just amazing. And thank you just for enlightening us today. I really appreciate it. And for all our audience members, thank you also for, as always, for all of your support. Thank you for joining us on this wonderful episode. But please don't forget to jump over to our website at myedtech.life, where you can check out this amazing episode and the other 309 episodes that we have, where I guarantee you will find some knowledge nuggets that you can sprinkle on to what you are already doing great. And if you haven't done so yet, guys, we need about 28 more followers on our YouTube channel so we can get to 1,000. And that is our goal, to get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So please head on over, give us a thumbs up, follow us, subscribe, and share the channel with all of your friends so they can check out these amazing episodes. And as always, you can find us on all socials at myedtechlive. But as always, my friends, from the bottom of my heart, until next time, don't forget, stay techie.